Hey YouTube, Twig here, bringing you all an update to my Melodious Yugioh deck profile for July 2021. Been wanting to update the Melodious deck for a good while now. For those of you that don't know, this is the deck used by Yuzu in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 anime. It's a fairy deck that focuses on fusion summoning, but we also were given a Link monster in the Dual Overload booster pack. What I find very funny is that slowly the Melodious deck is becoming the most undersupported of the Yuzu dimensional counterpart decks from the Arc 5 anime, because we're seeing more and more support in the form of Lyra Lusk, Wind Witches, and even, Lunalights. I think I've gotten more support than the Melodious deck at this point. So we can definitely use a revamp for this deck with some upcoming support in the future. But until then, we'll make do with the support we have, because it is a very fun deck to play, just with all the different special summoning card effects you gain with these cards. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So for the Melodious main deck monsters, we're running 3 of the Sonata Melodious Diva. For those of you that don't know, the Melodious deck focuses on gaining different monster effects when you special summon a Melodious monster to the field. So with Sonata, if you control a Melodious monster, you can also special summon this card from your hand. And while this card is special summoned on the field, all fairy monsters you control gain 500 attack and defense. So this card even stacks, and it's not a limit for how many Sonata you can special summon on the field. So you could potentially hit some pretty big numbers having all 3 of your Sonata on the field, giving for the fact that while it's special summon, you'll have a 1500 attack boost for all of your fairy monsters on the field. So even with some of the non-Melodious fairy monsters we run in the deck, it's just an added boost to swing into your opponent. But it definitely does come in handy when we summon out our Melodious fusion monsters on the field, giving them the additional boost they need to hit over a good amount of our opponent's different monsters. I also run 3 Kanan, the Melodious Diva. If you control a Melodious monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. You can only special summon Kanan, the Melodious Diva, once per turn this way. And once per turn, you can target one Melodious monster you control and change its battle position. So a big play comes off of this for the fact that you can summon as many Sonata onto the field, but you can only summon Kanan once. And they're also different levels, so you can't really use them for Xyz plays. You have the option for the Link play, though, very easily with these monsters on the field, just being able to have these 2 special summon down to the field, and then summon Bloom, Harmonious, the Melodious Composer, using these 2 monsters. But the big part of Kanan also comes in where you can attack with your Melodious monster, and then after attacked in main phase 2, switch it to defense using Kanan's monster effect, being able to protect that card from then being hit by your opponent if they were to take out some of your other Melodious monsters on the field, lowering the attack and then hitting for big damage against some of your lower attack Melodious monsters. And I also run 3 Soprana, the Melodious Songstress. This number might reduce to 2 if you wanted to up the next Melodious monster that I'm running in the deck. But when this card is special summoned, you can target 1 Melodious monster in your graveyard, except Soprano, the Melodious Songstress. Add it to your hand. You can only use this effect of Soprano, the Melodious Songstress, once per turn. And once per turn, you can fusion summon 1 Melodious fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters you control as fusion materials, including this card. So they have to be monsters you control as well, which we run a good number of monsters that can just special summon onto the field. So having that isn't really too big of an issue. And you have other cards that can special summon your Soprano onto the field to basically have the recycle power to add any of those Melodious monsters that can be special summoned onto the field. But with this card, you have your fusion option taken care of if you don't have Polymerization or any of your other Melodious fusion cards to rely on for your fusion plays. The banish is a big cost because you'll lose out on some of those other Melodious fairy monsters that you could potentially use for upcoming plays, but it's just that risk you need to take, and sometimes what you need just to make the plays that go that much faster. And then the card I could potentially put to 3, and what if I would take out 1 of the Soprano, the Melodious Songstress, and that is Araya, the Melodious Diva. While this card is special summon card is on the field, Melodious monsters you control cannot be targeted by card effects or be destroyed by battle. So this is a big wall card, just being able to sit on your Araya, the Melodious Diva. I really don't like using this card for any of my extra deck plays. I just like to keep it on the field because it protects my Melodious monsters. Once I summon Araya on the field by a special summon, as long as I have all of my other Melodious monsters to rely on for my fusion plays, this card can protect itself and those cards, being able to stop the target by card effects or destroy by battle. So they just basically have to have a card that cannot target or get rid of it by some other way. And it's very, very rarely that they have those specific cards to rely on against this deck, letting me go freely with all my different plays I may want to do. For some of the higher level Melodious monsters, I also run 2 Elegy, the Melodious Diva, a level 5 monster, but most of the time I don't even have to attribute some of this card out. It's just easy to special summon it with all the different resources I have. Special summon Melodious monsters you control cannot be destroyed by card effects. If this card was special summon, all fairy type monsters you control gain 300 attack. So this boost, along with Sonata, it just adds more and more power for all of your fairy type monsters on the field. And if you combo it with Araya, you have the option of this card cannot be targeted by card effects or destroyed by battle, and then Elegy making it so they can't be destroyed by card effects. So you can still have the targeted by card effects with Araya taken care of, but this just adds more to the wall on the field of what your opponent can't do. They can't be destroyed by battle, they can't be targeted by card effects, and they can't be destroyed by card effects. There's really not much your opponent can do for your cards on the field, unless it was a card effect that can, return to the hand or shuffle it back into the deck while being able to not target it. But you really only need 2 Elegy. Like I said, it's easy to special summon this card onto the field. The same with the final Melodious monster spot, and that is Mozarta, the Melodious Maestra. Now, I also run this because there are some fusion monsters that require a Melodious Maestra monster. Some of them also count as Melodious Maestras themselves, but sometimes it's just easier to use the main deck monster than to use a fusion monster to then go into another fusion monster. And Mozarta, the Melodious Maestra, gives us more special summon options. Once per turn, you can special summon 1 light fairy monster from your hand. You cannot special summon other monsters the turn you activate this effect, except for light monsters, which we're not limited to in this deck, and the majority of the light monsters we're running. But with Mozarta, when you get this card on the field, you can just summon Elegy out onto the field this way, and then have your special summon taken care of for all your other Melodious monsters as well. Having this card to protect your cards on the field, but Mozarta is here just for the option of special summon. If you can summon out another Mozarta, it just gives you more special summoning with the Mozarta you just summoned onto the field also. And then for some of the other fairy options, I also run 3 Honest. Now, this is just good if my opponent were to try and just attack into my Melodious monsters, knowing they can't be destroyed by battle or card effect, they can at least try and hit me for some damage. And then that's where Honest comes in, being able to just drop this card and then have it hit for a little bit more damage against my opponent, and then potentially destroying their monster. And the fact that I can boost up my Melodious monsters and all my fairy type monsters with Elegy and also my Sonata, I can boost Honest on the field, being able to summon this card out, attack with it, and then bounce it back to my hand if my opponent doesn't have a monster I want to hit over with this card, and then just bounce it back to my hand to use for protection later on. And then lastly, for the monster spot, I also run 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. It's just the hand trap of choice. There's really not too many, fairy hand traps that I want to run. Effect Veiler is a spellcaster, and Ash Blossom is a zombie. So it's mostly just going to stay in the hand to stop my opponent's plays, and then be able to carry through with my own plays on my turn. And that is it for the monsters. We'll now move on to the spells. One of the best spells in the deck for the Melodious monsters is First Movement Solo. If you control no monsters, special summon 1 level 4 or lower Melodious monster from your hand or deck. You can only activate 1 First Movement Solo per turn. You cannot special summon monsters the turn you activate this card, except for Melodious monsters. It's not really that much of a limit. We have a good majority of monsters in our extra deck that are Melodious, so being able to summon those cards is no problem at all. And the fact that First Movement Solo special summons out the monster gives us full reign to all the different Melodious monsters and their special summon monster effects, whether it be our Soprano or Araya. Araya is mostly the one I go to. You just have to have no monsters on the field, so opening this card up early game is the #1 way to fully benefit from it, giving you that monster. And like I said, it's not really a limit with what you can summon, because most of the time we're just going to go for Melodious monsters anyway. And I also run 1 Ostinato. This is a card, if you control no monsters, fusion summon 1 Melodious Fusion monster from your extra deck using 2 monsters from your hand and or deck as fusion materials. During the end phase of this turn, destroy that monster, fusion summoned by this effect. And if all fusions that were used for the fusion are in your graveyard, special summon all of them. So this is an excellent way to just give you back resources on the field. You can potentially send 2 of your cards. I'll go over the big combo with this card at the end of the video. And then after using that fusion monster to attack into your opponent or get rid of some of the resources, depending on the fusion monster you use, you can then summon back special summon resources to go more on the defensive against your opponent during their turn. For more fusion plays from your hand as well, I run 3 Polymerization. Just having this and Ostinato and also our Soprano means we have plenty of access to at least be able to use a fusion play with any hand we open up. Running 9 cards that focus on fusion plays just means that we have that much more access to all of the different ones to rely on using these cards. For some of the lower numbers for spells in the deck, we do run a good number of a few one-ofs, but for some of the more specific ones for the deck, I run 1 Valhalla, Hall of the Fallen. Just another great way to special summon a fairy monster from our hand. We have to control no monsters to activate this card, so it's basically a first movement solo with our cards in our hand. And if we open up one of the higher level ones that can't be summoned off of first movement solo, like Mozarta, it just makes for that greater of a continuous spell to set up on the field. I also run one World Legacy Succession. Our Link monster, being the Melodious Bloom Harmonist, has Link arrows that can definitely benefit from special summoning a Melodious monster from the graveyard onto the field. But for some other special summoning options, I also run one Transmodify and one Downbeat, both working with summoning a monster with the same attribute and type, which they're all light fairy type monsters. So if you have your Sonata on the field and you use Transmodify, you can then summon out your Kanon, or if you have your Kanon already on the field, you can use your Transmodify to summon out your Elegy. And with that, you can use the same premise with Downbeat to go back and forth between the level 3, 4, and 5 monsters, depending on which one you want and need special summoned on the field. And then for some of the other additional one-ofs, just one Call by the Grave to stop more of my opponent's graveyard plays, one Harpy's Feather Duster for destroying their back rows so I can successfully use all of my fusion summons, and one Monster Reborn. The special summoning is pretty explanatory with this card, not having as much of a limit like we do with World Legacy Succession with Monster Reborn. And then for the only traps in the deck, once again, going off of the fact that a big part of the deck is special summoning, just 3 back to the front. Being able to summon the Melodious monster onto the field and in defense means that if I have no monsters on my field and I just activate back to the front, summoning out Araya onto the field, Araya's special summon will kick in. When it's special summon cards on the field, Melodious monsters cannot be targeted by card effects or destroyed by battle, giving you just a wall against your opponent that they cannot destroy. They may be able to inflict some piercing damage to you, but this is just great protection against your opponent altogether. And that is it for the main deck. We will now move on to the extract. Now, some of the numbers that vary between the first of the Melodious Fusions is Schuberta, the Melodious Maestra, and Bloom Prima, the Melodious Choir. I would ideally run 1 Bloom Prima and 3 Schuberta. I just have, sadly, the 1 Schuberta. So mix your numbers with all these cards in the deck how you want if you have some of these specific numbers. Schuberta needs 2 Melodious monsters, so very, very easy to fusion summon this card out. During either player's turn, you can target up to 3 cards in either graveyard, banish them. If you do, this card gains 200 attack for each card. This effect can only be used once while this card's on the field, so it's during either player's turn, which is a great option with this card, just being able to banish resources from your opponent's graveyard. And with your Bloom Prima, this card gains 300 attack for each fusion material used for it, just needing a Melodious Maestra and 1 or more Melodious monsters. And this card can make a second attack during each battle phase, and if this fusion summon card is sent to the graveyard, you can target 1 Melodious monster in your graveyard and add to your hand. Recycle power with your Bloom Prima, but the power boost that this card can get, the more fusion material you use for it. It all comes down to preference of which one you wanted to use on the field. But the big boss monster for the fusion monsters falls into the category of Bloom Diva, the Melodious Choir. You need 1 Melodious Maestra and 1 Melodious to make it. It cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. Also, you take no battle damage from attacks involving this card. And if this card battles a special summon monster after damage calc, you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to the difference between the original attack of that opponent's monster and this card if you do destroy that opponent's monster. So this is the big damage that you can hit with this card, having a low attack point monster, but one that's also basically immune to all the different cards your opponent may try, while still being able to inflict some pretty heavy damage against your opponents. For the Link monster, running 2 of the Bloom Harmonist, the Melodious Composer, needing 2 fairy monsters. You can even ideally use Honest if you need. For this Link monster, if this card's Link summon, you can discard 1 card to special summon 2 Melodious monsters with different levels from your deck into zones this card points to in defense position, and you cannot special summon the turn you activate this except for Melodious monsters. You can only use this effect of Bloom Harmonist once per turn, and if a Melodious monster this card points to attacks your opponent, cannot activate card effects until the end of damage step. So this is the pressure that you can get when you have your Melodious Choir being pointed to by your Bloom Harmonist, being able to swing at your opponent for some pretty heavy damage and having your opponent not be able to do anything about it. But also just being able to set up more special summons using this card after investing in a Link play just gets you more and more bigger monsters on the field, being able to have different level monsters for when this card summons them out. For some of the more generic Link monsters, I also run 1 Hippo Shenengan, 1 Lena the Light Charmer Lustrous, 1 Predaplant Vert Anaconda for the polymerization plays when we can use them, 1 Nightmare Phoenix, and 1 Nightmare Unicorn. They're not fairy monsters, but still good options to have for the Link plays. And then for the Xyz monsters, just 1 Starliege Paladynamo and 1 Bujinte Tsukiyomi, focusing more on the rank 4 light plays for draw power and just recycling for your hand. And then as for some of the go-to plays, like I said, you can rely on Ostinato for just one of those setups if you control no monsters, being able to fusion summon one Melodious Fusion monster from your extra deck using 2 monsters from your hand or deck. So you can send your Mozarta. It also counts as a Maestra monster. So you would send Mozarta and, let's say, Araya to the graveyard. It can even be Elegy, depending on the play you want to go for. That would set up more of a wall, but Mozarta would just be easier summoned onto the field for the second card effect of Ostinato. So if you send Elegy and your Araya, you can then summon out your Schuberta onto the field, which then you can use this card's effect to banish your opponent's cards, then also being able to attack with this card, and then at the end of the turn, destroy that monster and fusion some of the 2 cards used for it, setting up your wall of basically protection against your opponent that they really can't do much about. And then you can use these cards next turn for the link summon, if you wish, of your go-to Bloom Harness, giving you the then play to summon out more Melodious monsters onto the field of different levels for more resources, which you can then use cards like Mozarta to special summon more cards on the field if you have additional Araya or Elegies in your hand to summon using your Mozarta to keep the plays going from there. Some of the other ones that you can rely on is just the easy setup of your special summoning for your Melodious monsters, being able to even just normal summon out, let's say, your Kanan, and then special summoning your Sonata can give you the 2 monsters needed to link summon out your Bloom Harmonious. And then when it's link summon, being able to just discard a card from your hand to special summon 2 different level of Melodious monsters can then set up more of the protection for your wall against your opponent and more fusion material to use for some other bigger plays, or like I said, just protection against them. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoy the video. I've always loved, doing an update to the Melodious deck. I really do hope we get more support for this deck because, like I said, it is falling behind with some of the other support we've gotten for some of the other cards, including Lyra Lusk and Wind Witches. As we get more and more support for them, I feel like Melodious is sadly being overlooked. But as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And Kira Twig out.